Hello, this is Craig Wescoe recording for TCGplayer.com, and today we're going to be doing Modern Spirits. This is a deck that I've been thinking about for a while, ever since the new Eldritch Moon set came out, and today we're going to take it for a spin. So the basis of the deck, we're an Ether Vial deck, of course, not only because I'm playing it, but also because it kind of makes the deck work. Almost every card in the deck, every important card, is a creature, so we want to be curving out with Mausoleum Wanderer into something like Selfless Spirit or Rattle Chains, and then we want to play Drugskull Captain or Spell Queller. And so any of these cards can be put into play off of Ether Vial. So this is just a great way to be able to cast our spells and play more creatures each turn. So we can do things like play Favorable Winds on turn 2, while also tapping Ether Vial to play the Wanderer, and then we can play Lingering Souls and tap the Vial to put Rattle Chains onto the battlefield, and then next turn we can flash back Lingering Souls, and then we can flash Drugskull Captain onto the battlefield, and then we can play Phantasmal Image and copy the Drugskull Captain. We could just do all sorts of crazy fun things with this deck. And Ether Vial is just, of course, the premier first turn play for the deck. Now, the other really cool thing that Ether Vial does for this deck is if we, let's say, cast a Spell Queller on turn 3 to counter their spell, then they try to cast Lightning Bolt countering or killing our Spell Queller, we can then tap Ether Vial with 2 counters on it and put Phantasmal Image onto the battlefield, copy the Spell Queller, exile that Lightning Bolt. So then we have basically 2 copies of Spell Queller on 2 different spells. So that's pretty cool. And then another thing we could do if they try to bolt our Spell Queller is just flash Rattle Chains onto the battlefield. That's kind of a trick that happens in Standard too. Another trick that happens in Standard, we could just sacrifice our Selfless Spirit to make Spell Queller indestructible, so then the bolt or terminate or whatever doesn't kill it. Also protects our team from Damnation, Supreme Verdict, Anger of the Gods, all kinds of nonsense we don't want to come up against. So another card that can counter Damnation or Anger of the Gods or other cool stuff, Mausoleum Wanderer. So the Wanderer gets bigger for each creature we play, because almost every creature in the deck is a spirit. It's especially good with Lingering Souls. So if we have, say, 5 mana on turn 5, we go play Lingering Souls, make 2 spirits, flash it back, make 2 more, attack for 5 with my Mausoleum Wanderer. Yeah. So another cool thing we can do with Mausoleum Wanderer is we can play Drugskull Captain, making the Wanderer +1/+1, and now it becomes a sacrifice to counter a spell unless they pay 2. Because it doesn't check how big it is from spirits being played this turn, it just checks its power. So if Drugskull Captain is pumping it, that counts. If Favorable Winds is pumping it, that counts. It doesn't matter what's pumping it. It could be Sorin pumping it. It could be anything that pumps it. And it just basically turns from Force Spike into Mana Leak pretty quick in this deck. So another card that I have in this deck is Judge's Familiar. It's not a spirit. It's the only non-spirit in the deck. Well, sort of. But it does get pumped by Favorable Winds, and in general it just fits with what the deck is trying to do. The deck wants to attack in the air, and the deck also wants to be resilient to spells. So we want to be able to make our spells cost just a little bit more, and a Judge's Familiar is just kind of like another Mausoleum Wanderer. The opponent might tap out and say, well, you know, I'm casting this spell, I know you're just going to sack your Mausoleum Wanderer, but I just really have to get the Wanderer off the board. And then it's like, oh, well, I'll just flash Judge's Familiar onto the battlefield with this Ether Vial or whatever, and sacrifice that one because it's less important. So the deck can do a lot of really cool things. Another thing, I had already mentioned flashing Phantasmal Image onto the battlefield with Ether Vial to copy a Spell Queller. You can also copy a Drugskull Captain. So if you have a Drugskull Captain giving all other spirits +1/+1 and hexproof, and then you copy it with a Phantasmal Image, the Phantasmal Image and the Drogskull Captain give each other +1/+1 and hexproof. And so an image with hexproof means it can't be targeted. So it's basically exactly the same as a Drogskull Captain. So that's a pretty cool interaction this deck has as well. So we went over a lot of the interactions. Now, a key card in the deck that I didn't originally have, but I think can make the deck more resilient to removal spells, is Moorland Haunt. So we already have 2 favorable wins and 4 Drogskull Captains, so we have 6 ways to pump spirits, and then plus a Sorin, which is basically 7 ways to pump. So whenever our guys start dying, we can just make more spirits. And whenever we make a spirit, Mausoleum Wanderer gets bigger too. So we can do a lot of really cool, cute little tricks with Moorland Haunt. I think it's enough to merit in the deck. Cavern of Souls makes our spirits uncounterable, and also gives us blue or white mana, whichever one we need, to cast our 3-drops. And then we have Mutavault. Mutavault counts as a spirit. So it doesn't fly, so it's not going to help us if we're just racing in the air, but it is going to block. It's going to get the pump ability from Drogskull Captain. Unfortunately, not the pump from favorable wins, but it's just overall a pretty powerful card. We can even protect it with Rattle Chains, stuff like that. So we have Mutavault, we have Moorland Haunt, we have Cavern of Souls, then we have a bunch of lands that just basically help fix our mana. Okay, now for the sideboard, it's kind of a hodgepodge of things. Kataki is the only card that might that kind of fits with the synergy of the deck. It's a spirit, so it gains the bonuses from Drogskull Captain, Rattle Chains, things like that. Being able to flash Kataki onto the battlefield is kind of cool. I mean, I guess it probably won't come up too much, but it's just something we do. Against Affinity, we play Kataki, and if we have a Drogskull Captain on the battlefield, then they can't target our Kataki. So even if they have the Galvanic Blast, they still can't target Kataki. So that's one reason why I'm going with this over Stony Silence. The other reason is because we want to keep our Ether Vials in. So some more cards in the sideboard. Spellskite, a lot of decks in Modern just target things, target their own guys. Also acts as kind of another pseudo Drogskull Captain or Rattle Chains, protecting our own creatures from removal spells. We definitely want to protect our Spell Quellers so they don't just get their spell back. Spell Pierce, another way to just counter some spells. Same with Negate. There's a lot of spell-based decks in Modern. When we side out our Path to Exiles, we're going to oftentimes side in more counters. Rest in Peace, there's plenty of graveyard decks going around. We have graveyard combo decks like Gorya's Vengeance and the Malira combo. And then we have other just value graveyard decks with like Tarmogoyfs and things like that, which we'll probably side in one of the two against. Disenchant, just kind of a catch-all. Good against Knight of Souls Betrayal, good against any sort of artifact or enchantment-based combo deck. Just a general all-purpose card that I like having on my board. A few one-ofs. We have one Gut Shot, because sometimes you just want to kill a thing. Also very good against Infect, which is a very popular deck right now. Supreme Verdict. This card is mostly in here against Merfolk, because an uncounterable Wrath is just really good against Merfolk. But I also just want to bring it in against any sort of big creature deck that's going to get ahead of us. And since a lot of our creatures flash, between Rattle Chain, Spell Queller, Ether Vial, then we can just flash things back like Lingering Souls. We don't have to commit all our creatures to the board on curve. We could just kind of make a few blocks, stay alive, play Lingering Souls, and then just verdict their whole board away, and then start playing our creatures. So if we draw our Supreme Verdict against decks that go wide, I think that we could just really turn some of the opponent's best draws into just they're dead. So I only have one. It's not something we're relying on, but it's just a good card to have. Then the last card is Gideon. The best answer to Knight of Souls Betrayal, just Emblem, and you basically just countered the spell. Or it's just another great way to win the the attrition wars against like Jeskai or Jund or any sort of mid-range deck that's just trying to value us out. It's just a really good card in those matchups. Jund, they can't Abrupt Decay it, and it just, like I said, it counters the Knight of Souls Betrayal effectively with the emblem. And then by embleming our team, that's just another anthem. We already have 6, potentially 10 anthems in the deck. Adding just another one is like just pure value, basically. So that's the deck. It's mostly blue-white spirits. I'll call it Esper spirits. I have mostly black just for Lingering Souls and Sorin. But let's see how it goes. This deck looks super fun to play.